Welcome back to another deep dive with Colin. Today we are following up on last week's topic, which was prepping vector art for direct-to-film printing. In this deep dive, we are going to be prepping that same art in Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, what we're going to be doing here is still directly translates to other pixel-based programs. Just like in Illustrator, there are a few things to be aware of when you are prepping your art in a pixel-based program. Number one, garbage in, garbage out. It's pretty self-explanatory. You will never going to be able to properly fix low-resolution JPEGs. JPEG is a lossy format. If it's been upsized, downsized, resampled, you're not bringing it back from death. Always work at higher resolutions like 300 dpi and always do your work at final image size. If you're unsure where to go in Photoshop to see that, you go up under image, image size, and that's where you will see the width, the height, and the resolution of the image you're working with. If you happen to be working with a image that is 72 dpi but like 23, 56, 84 inches wide, which you will get from a lot of graphic sites, you will find artwork saved at 72 dpi at higher pixel ratios. You're going to want to collapse that down to your working size at 300 dpi. When you do that, just be aware that you can get some fuzzy edges on some of those parts of the design that look like they should have harder edges. While you're doing the background knockout, we'll talk about how to fix some of that. We're going to click OK. Number three, you are still going to need to be aware of the RGB to CMYK conversion. In Photoshop, there's this little window called the info window. And it's got this great little part of it that's a CMYK readout. If you don't know where to go to find that in Photoshop, it's up here under Window, and it's all done alphabetical. You just go down to Info, click that, and then the window will pop up. But the nice thing about it is if you hover over a part of the design, using your eyedropper tool makes this a little bit easier. That's located right here. If you hover over part of the design, you can get the CMYK readout for that color. In this case, I'm looking at 1% cyan, 12% magenta, 69% yellow, etc. But as I go to other parts of this design, an exclamation point pops up. Now that exclamation point tells you that it's out of gamut. And if you convert from RGB to CMYK, there's going to be some color shift. This is a really quick, easy tool to use to see if your design is in a CMYK gamut or not, and to know whether or not you're going to see some potential shift and whether or not you need to go in and make some adjustments to your design. Number four, if your design is not floated, meaning you can't see the gray and white grid pattern behind your art, you're going to need to remove the background. And this is what that looks like. If you do not have any of this checkerboard pattern behind your design, you're going to need to knock out part of that design and potentially all the background and a few other things, artwork dependent. To do this, tools like the Magic Wand tool are your friend. More on how to use that here in a little bit, because we need to remove the background from this design. Number five, letting the t-shirt come through the design, which makes your print softer, can be more of a challenge. I have two designs here. This Halloween Mama, in which we are needing to remove the background as well as the black in the design in order to put this on a black garment. Specifically, this is going on a hoodie for a coworker of mine. So if we can remove all that ink from the design, it's going to feel so much better. And there's a process to it that we'll go over here in a little bit. And also, your ability to make halftone fades are both simplified and made more complex depending on the art you are working with. So, for example, in this design here, knocking out the black is pretty straightforward. This is much more of a graphical design. But for this one over here, this is much more photographic. So in order to do a good fade where the design fades to the t-shirt, there's a little bit more work involved. So I have those 3 different images here that we're going to be working with. And after this video is done, we're going to print them out along with some of the art from the Illustrator video that we did. And we're going to transfer them. During that process, we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, the things to look out for when you're transferring, and how to get the best out of your transfer tools. So hang on, let's dive into it and get going. So let's begin by removing the background on this little monsters design. I'm going to take this extra layer, move it down here, select the layer, and we're going to grab our magic wand tool. Now, if you've never used the magic wand tool before, this comes over with a default tolerance of around 32, and I think anti-alias is turned on at that point. Now, we don't want to have anti-alias turned on, as that is going to give us soft fuzzy edges, which is great if you're doing multi-layer stacking in Photoshop. Everything blends together really nicely, but it doesn't work to give us the edge definition that we want for printing out to a direct-to-film printer. We want to make sure contiguous is clicked on. So when we click this background, every bit of this color that is connected will be selected, which is why we can see the majority of the design is selected. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give us colors inside the design that are not connected. If we turn off contiguous and click the background, now you can see how we have these marching ants that have selected similar colors that are inside the design. So we're going to turn on contiguous, select the background, and we're going to continue through the design of picking the sections of the design that are not connected but that need to be knocked out. So you can see here we've got a reasonable selection on the edges, and we want to get these pieces that are inside. Now, as you are going through the design, you're going to recognize that we haven't grabbed all the way up against the edge of the design. Which is actually near impossible to do considering how the pixels in a design work in a pixel-based program. So we're going to do our best, and I'll show you how we work with that here a little later. So we're going to zoom through this design. I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I select. You can see the plus next to the magic wand tool, and select the rest of our design. If I do not feel like I have enough of a design element, I'm going to click closer to where that color is in order to grab more of it while holding down the Shift key. And you can see there will be times where we end up grabbing too much of a color, and you need to go back and adjust for that. Okay, now we can see here that we definitely got more of this horn knocked out than we really want. So I'm going to grab the magic lasso tool, hold down the option button on the Mac, and I'm going to create like a little design here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this inside section in a slightly creative way, and that looks pretty good. All right, now I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to show you what happens if we just click delete. So hitting the delete button, deselect, I'm going to take this background color that I have, background layer that I have now, and edit fill. I'm going to put in a contrasting color so that we can see how good that selection did and did not work. We can see that the background here is pretty rough. Our knockout, left a lot of brighter colored pixels, which are going to show up when we hit print. So we want to find a way to get rid of those. And so I'm going to go up under here, select, reselect. Then I'm going to go up under select, modify, and expand. And we're going to expand this by 1 pixel at 300 dpi. And you can see how our selection edges grew, and we're knocking out some of these little pieces of the design, which is an unfortunate drawback. If you have design elements that you want to keep You're like, whoa, no, that's too much. You're going to need to go in and actually physically use the eraser tool and erase the parts around it that you don't want. So I'm going to click delete with that 1-point expansion. Whoops, I need to have the correct layer selected. Delete, Control D. And you can see how it's not perfect by using the magic wand tool, but it works pretty good and it works pretty fast. It does not give you a perfect edge though, but it's a great fast way. If you want any of this to be smoother or more complete, you will need to go in and physically click and maneuver and delete and erase or redraw whatever it is in the design that you want to keep there for your customer or for yourself. But that is the essence of knocking out a background within Photoshop for DTF printing. If this was to be used for just creating another layer within a design, we would have left anti-alias on, left some of those edges a little bit smoother, and it would have blended great. But of course, that does not translate and will not print out the way that we actually want it to as a transfer. You're going to have those bright edges. We're going to have white ink printing behind them, and it just simply doesn't look good. All right, let's move on to our next design. This is Halloween Mama. This is an AI-generated design that one of our teammates' friends made, and then it went through some saving as a JPEG, upscaling, downsizing. So we've got some very obvious and clear JPEG artifacts in this design. Not only that, but we got some really soft, fuzzy edges. Part of the reason why I chose this design for this part of the class is this is a very real world situation that you will be getting into when you're trying to create a design or prep a design for direct-to-film printing. So in this, we're going to walk through it. We're going to show you some of the basics that you're going to want to look at. Anything advanced is just going to be very time consuming, and usually it goes back to somebody needing to redraw portions of it so it looks better. So let's take a look at this image, dive in. As you can see, we have some very clear artifacting. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. These are JPEG artifacts, these fuzzy edges here. They're usually kind of blocky. Let's take a look at our channels to see if we get a more clear visual. We can see some of that here, especially in here. Go back to the full RGB image. Lines are not clean and sharp. There's some very clear indications. Another indication is our edge quality. It's going to be pretty bad. We have quite a bit of fading between a solid black and then levels of gray, where normally this intention was probably meant to be more like a vector type background, harder edges, sharper edges, as much as AI, of course, can get there. So we're going to work on a little bit of color balance. We want to make sure that our blacks are black. Using our info window over here, white, solid white is 255, so our white's not quite white, which isn't a big deal if we're deleting the background. But our black is not quite black either. And it's just going to help us when it comes to trying to knock out black from this design, because we want this to go on a black garment. And then in here with our gray, that can also make things challenging when we've got this texture in here, because we have lights and darks, and we've got to be very careful that we're not grabbing too much black out of our gray. So even with color adjustments, taking the gray, getting a correct selection to make it solid gray is going to be a challenge. So again, we're going to work with this. Our goal is to put this onto a black hoodie. And we're going to make sure that enough of the black background is removed, that it's going to feel very nice and lightweight on the hoodie. Not that you really feel it, but you do feel crinkle effect if it's a bigger solid spot. So let's go through this. We're going to duplicate our working layer. I didn't do that in the last one, and you can see that, well, I need to, make some selections and go backwards in history if I made a mistake. So we're going to work on a copy. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my curves. Now you can work in levels. Everything is very similar. In curves, you have a little bit more control, but whatever you're comfortable with, you should work in. So if we're wanting to brighten up our design, this is the side that we go with. And you can see that our white now is 255 in our info window right over here. That is now at 255. And for our blacks, we just want to pull that up here, make some of our black areas a little denser. Now, because of JPEG artifacts, you can see that as we get closer to the color, you get that haloing effect, especially there in that red channel. So that orange is coming out there. So if I was to take a little swatch of that, oh, I still have my curves level up. I'm going to click cancel on that. Double click this. You can see that it's not black. It's a very, very deep red. So again, that's going to cause trouble when we're trying to fully knock out the black. So I'll bring my levels back up. Go back over here. Again, it doesn't have to be much. We're just looking at how much brighter the design can end up getting. Pull our shadows in. I'm making rough movements. Let's see there. Overall pretty good. Now, if we really wanted to try and dial in this and do a color correction, then we go into curves and try and adjust just the red channel to get that closer to zero, but that can end up throwing out our color balance. So another one is to, do we want it to be a little darker, a little lighter, more blonde? I think that's pretty good. I'm going to click OK. And now what we're going to do is we're going to knock out the white background, and we're going to show you what's left as an artifact. So I'm going to use the Magic Wand tool again. Put this one up at 50. Make sure that contiguous is on. I'm going to be up a little bit higher because I want it to grab in a little bit more. I know that there is a soft fuzzy edge around the whole thing, and I'll show you how we're going to deal with that. So that's good. I'm going to hit delete. Control D to deselect, and you can see here that white outline that you end up getting because those edges were soft because of the JPEG artifact. Now I still have this gray bar over here, so I'm going to delete that. Grab my eraser tool, hold it over that section. I'm going to hold down Shift, and now I can pull a straight line. Even if I'm way off of it, pull a straight line down. Deselect if anything was selected. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to get rid of this white outline because it's not good. It's not a good white outline. So we're going to use a nice little layer effect trick. We're going to double click our layer. We're going to click on stroke, and we're going to pick a dark gray. We could pick a red, give us a little spooky effect, or maybe even an orange to go along with what's going on in here, Halloween Mama pumpkin theme. Whatever you give it is totally fine. Or you can just go with keeping it on the dark side and go with the dark gray. We're going to click OK. I have the stroke here positioned in the center of the outside edge, so it's both going to go outside and inside, very much like a stroke in Illustrator. And your pixels instead of points. So I picked 12 pixels, so it's going to go 6 pixels in, 6 pixels out. And it's going to cover up the majority of that white fuzzy edge and give us a nice spooky effect. So let's zoom in a little bit on that edge and just take a look. Again, it's not perfect, but this looks pretty good given the quality of the image that we were given. I'm going to zoom out. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to make a selection of all the black. And if you know screen printing, there's so many different ways to generate black. But we're going to go through, first thing we want to do is we don't want to leave the stroke effect on. We want to collapse this. We want to merge the layers that are visible. In this, I'm going to be okay with merging down into the black layer because I can just make another one. So merge down. And now we have a flattened layer of all the things that we were working on. If I needed to go back and make a change, it's a little late. I would have to go back and make a duplicate in order to move forward. So now what we want to do is we want to pull out our black. Can we use the Magic Wand tool? Let's find out. So if I select the Magic Wand tool, for this I don't want contiguous on because I want to be able to select all the black. So let's click that and see what we come up with. Now the values that I gave it are not perfect in terms of capturing all my gray. So let's go ahead and turn that down to 40 and try this again. That's a better edge effect. Now the only drawback, of course, is because we're working with a JPEG, the edge selection is going to be pretty bad, and there isn't much we can really do about it. We don't want to give, as an example, we don't want to give this hair a gray stroke because that just looks wrong. But this may be about all we can really do. We can work a little harder to pull more black in more areas, get closer on some of these edges, but that's going to need to be an individual adjustment, because as we do that, we're going to pull out more and more of these darker shades that kind of complete how the hair looks. So again, this is going to be a decision on your part as to how much is actually pulled out with a bad piece of art. So I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to hit delete, Control D, and we can see the effects of how much is gone from our design. So here's the original design and here's the new knockout. I'm going to create a new layer, click OK, edit fill, and instead of it being color, I'm going to go down to black. Click OK. And that's what it's going to look like when it prints, and it's going to look pretty close to that when it's transferred as well. These darker shades in here are going to transfer over as those darker colors. And it's not going to look too bad. There is going to be, we're going to see a little bit of a reflection off of it, a little bit of a shine. But considering what this is going to be pretty good. The proof, of course, is going to be when we get it on press, the heat press. All right. This design is now done. The only thing that I didn't do was confirm what the final dimensional size is going to be. Once I get that, I may need to make adjustments. We'll find out. And if there's anything that I needed to change, anything observed in the art that I needed to change, I'll let you guys know. So let's move on to the most complex design that we have here, the panther. So this panther, I've actually already screen printed this in one of our SPE classes. And it turned out really good. Oversized print, class loved it, looked really good, 5 screens, 55 line, went wonderful. So having screen printer sensibilities and having lived on the artwork and separation side of dealing with artwork like this for over 20 years, I looked at this and took it on as an awesome new challenge and said, I'm going to make the best DTF transfer out there. It's going to look like screen printing. And then I transferred a hot mess. Separating the black from a design for DTF is not like screen printing. The expectation of detail level, completely different. It's not a goal of holding high resolution with that halftone dot pattern that we create. It's more about a strategic knockout of that background and shadow colors. It's not about keeping your shadow detail and depth and really showing a reproduction. This is about creating a high contrast impact of the design. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have any shadows. It just means that you've got to adjust your expectations and your customers if they've come from a world of screen printing. It means that you need to have an opinion on your shadows, a different opinion on your shadows than you would if you're screen printing. You actually want to remove some of that shadow detail. So we're going to go through this. I'm going to talk about it from the screen printer's point of view. So let's dive in. First thing you want to do, of course, is work on a duplicate layer, which I have done here. My color balance is already pretty good. So we want to generate a contrast layer in which we can play with our black and white levels in order to get the shadows that we want to knock out. And the simplest way to do that is to create a grayscale. So there's two ways to do that. I'm going to duplicate this one more time, and we can either convert the whole file to grayscale, or we can go up under Image, Adjustments, Black and White, and call that good. This is very close, if not the same, as if you were converting your image to grayscale, but it's still in an RGB color mode. So we're going to click OK. And that's the beginning. That's the foundation. There are a few other ways to create a grayscale. If you've done screen printing separations, going to lab mode and taking that lightness channel is one version. You can also go in and just start selecting black and create an effect that way to do a simpler knockout. You can grab CMYK. You can grab the black out of CMYK. There's dozens of ways to generate the black that you want and then to create the contrast that you want. All of them are valid as long as the transfer looks good. So let's talk about this one. We're going to show you the goals, the foundations of what you want to be looking for, and however you approach creating this grayscale mask. Now, I like curves. We've talked about this a few times. We want to clip some shadows, pull out that depth, and then we want to boost our highlights. And in this heightened contrast, that black that you see there gets converted to a halftone through a bitmap conversion that we'll show you here in a little bit. And then that's overlaid and knocked out of the design. So we're removing all of that black. So this contrast level that you have here of keeping shadow details or choosing to lose them, whether it's through any method that you choose, is up to you. There's multiple ways to get there. The proof is always in the transfer. So in curves, this is one way to do it. You can see that we're darkening up our shadows a little more. Pull that out a little bit. And that's one way to get there. Let's click OK. Select all, copy. I'm going to cheat here, go backwards in history. And I'm going to paste in front. This is how you get around making a duplicate. So that's one way to do that. Or we can pull up our levels and boost it this way. Pull out some of those shadows. Play with some of those values this way. And what I find is that higher contrast is actually better. You don't want super long, amazing fades that your screen print sensibilities think are wonderful. That looks pretty good. Again, select all, copy, go backwards in history, and paste. So here's the first one that I did with my curves, and here's the second one that I did with my levels. It's just a difference in the shadows. Both of these are going to end up transferring really well, and we can choose either one that we want. So I'm going to choose the one here on top because I have more of my shadow removed from this, and it's going to end up creating a better contrast. I keep saying that, contrast, contrast, contrast. That's what we're looking for on that final print. So now what I need to do is I need to take this information, this grayscale contrast, and convert to a halftone. So I'm going to duplicate this layer into a new file. It's just for the moment. I'm going to go image mode because we weren't actually in a grayscale mode. We need to convert to grayscale. Discard all color. And then we're going to go up into image mode again and go to bitmap. We're going to flatten layers. That's fine. It's the only layer. I'm going to click OK. Now, here is the other part of the stop being a screen printer mentality. You want to lower lines per inch when you're doing something like this. If you go to higher line per inch, you end up running into the issues of the white printer. That white inkjet can be a little, depending on who's doing your printing for you and who's creating the transfer in the machine, how well it's dialed, it can be a little fuzzy. You need to worry about your pixel choke so that you get a good dot formation, but you don't lose some things. It's going a finer detail is actually bad. It's a struggle. than it is going with a slightly larger dot, which again, the goal is that you don't really see it anyways. So anywhere between 25 and 35 line is good. I'm right in the middle at 20. I'm right in the middle at 30. My angle, again, it's just about something that looks pretty and pleasing to the eye. It can be at 45 line. It can be at 25 line. Pick something that looks good to you. That's all that's about. And then we're going to pick a round dot. And we're going to click OK. Now, this is a big image, so you're not really seeing the effects of those dots until I zoom in. So you can see here that we've got slightly larger dots, higher contrast in our fade-offs. We don't have any really tiny dots. We have a couple here and there, but not a whole lot of them. And that's actually a good thing. Those tinier dots can be troublesome to transfer. And again, depending on who's doing who's creating your transfer, you can see a halo of the adhesive, you can see a halo of the white, any number of things. So that size of dot is important to keep in mind, which is why the higher contrast is good. So going to image mode grayscale, because we can't do anything with the bitmap. Going to duplicate this back into the original. Turn that off. I'm going to label this one 30 LPI, just so that we remember what it is. And now what I need to do, I'm going to zoom in again. You can see that. I need to remove the white from it, because when you bitmap, it becomes a solid image, black and white. So I have my magic wand turned on. Whether this is, 255 or 0 doesn't matter. I do not have contiguous turned on, so I'm selecting all the white. Going to hit delete. And now what I'm going to do is turn that on over the design and zoom in a little bit. So it's a little more challenging to see, which is good. We have in those shadow areas some of that halftone knockout, and I'll turn the halftone off and on so you can see that difference. And now that you see it turned off and on, you can see what we're talking about. So these are fairly tiny dots in a fairly big area, and we're seeing that contrast effect. We don't want wispiness going to nothing. We want dots that stop. We still have good amount of detail here in the nose. Did lose a little bit of it, but if you have something fading to black, kind of like in that Halloween Mama, it can look a little shiny and like something that you don't want. So having those shadow details print as higher levels, not necessarily a good thing. There we go. So that is the before and the after. Now on screen it looks great. The proof is always in the transfer. Now, what do we do at this point? So there's two things we can do. We can either take this and make it as a layer mask for a design. That is a non-destructive way of doing that, but I have duplicates of this. So what I'm going to do, going to select it, go straight to the black, and click delete. That's the amount of ink that's actually going to print. Just like the Halloween Mama, it's going to be a lighter print on the garment, and the contrast of the black background is going to give us that depth and pop. Edit, fill, black. Boom. So that's the goal. That's the hope. Let's get this sucker on press, the heat press, and see how this looks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off this black layer. I am going to go to File, Export, Export As. We can see the file size of this design is 5.8 megs. I am choosing a smaller file as a PNG. I don't need to include any of this, but this is my preview. I do prefer doing full detail in my designs when they're going out. Lossy is lossy. At least we're keeping as much as we can. So I'm going to click Export. And it's going right into the folder that I got everything out of, PNG to print, Black Panther knock test. Let's write down 2. And then we're going to click save. This is going into a lot of other stuff that I've already done and we've been doing testing on. So I'm going to click save here. And there we go. We're done. I'm going to save this file. Close this one. Don't need it for anything, so we can click that we're done. And when you see me next, we are going to be in front of the heat press. I'm going to pull out these designs that I just did in Photoshop and a few designs that I did in Illustrator that you saw me work with. And we're going to go through a bunch of different transfer methods. We're going to talk about low temperature transfers. We're going to talk about regular temperature and some of the fabric challenges that you can have. As always, thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate your viewership. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below or a question down below. Submit your questions. We have a couple of links for that available. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content we're doing. Share this with a friend if you know somebody who's struggling with creating art or separating art for DTF transfers. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.